A small landlord learned a huge lesson on why landlords and tenants cannot be friends and why you must treat your properties as a business when they tried to evict a tenant who had stayed in their property for the last 34 years. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Boston, Massachusetts. Obviously, Boston is one of those places where I say, hey, I wouldn't invest there because they are very anti-landlord, they're very anti-property rights, right? But in this situation in particular, it isn't necessarily the laws of Boston that caused the issue. It is the lack of knowledge of the laws in terms of, how the eviction process goes and what laws the landlord must abide by. It's that lack of knowledge that caused all of this for this landlord. Now, I don't normally cover a story that talks negatively about a landlord, right? But I thought I would highlight this situation because a lot of small mom and pop landlords who maybe own one property, they could fall into this very same problem. And my hope is that when you hear this story, you'll see, okay, maybe I should take different action than what this landlord did. Okay. This landlord, basically, they created their own issue by not knowing the law, not knowing how, the eviction process worked. And it's going to cost them. It's going to cost them in more ways than one. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Now, just out of curiosity, when you were a brand new landlord, did you make any mistakes? And, did it cost you any money? I know I did. Okay. I did make mistakes. It did end up costing me money. It fortunately did not have to do with the eviction process, but this sort of thing, it could happen to anyone. And so that's why I'm covering this story, okay? So anyway, let's get into it. This article is coming from Boston25news.com, and it says, tenant fighting eviction after 34 years in the same unit. And, they, of course, are pushing this from the tenant's perspective as though this is just some greedy, evil landlord, right? And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's more a case of the landlord not knowing the law. So anyway, this article has a video that goes along with it, and I'll play that video for you right now.
Yes, Mark and Vanessa, and what the activists worry about is that some tenants may not realize you can't just be ordered out of a property. That job is left up to the housing courts, something that this landlord may be learning the hard way. For more than 30 years, Juan Diaz has called Hyde Park home, renting a one-bedroom apartment in this building on Oak Street. But last fall, Diaz got a shock.
Necesito el apartamento, mi familia va a vivir ahí. So after 35 years of living there, he's being evicted, no fault. He's got a letter out of nowhere saying, I need you out, my family's gonna move in.
Diaz, a healthcare worker, was given 30 days to not only move out, but find something affordable to move to. As almost any renter in Boston can attest, good luck with that. Desperate, Diaz turned to the tenants' rights organization, City Life.
We advise him not to leave because the landlord has no really authority to take him out of his home.
And so Diaz continued to faithfully pay his rent, $1,350 a month. But that did not change the property owner's plans, and that's what brought Diaz to housing court Tuesday.
The only person that can evict you from your home is a judge.
Housing advocates say Diaz is one of many Bostonians getting the earth-shattering news that, no fault of their own, they need to move and fast.
These are no-fault evictions. If the landlord wants more money, they want to raise the rent, tenant can't pay, this is what happens.
No-fault evictions are legal. 30-day notices to get out are not, unless they're the result of a legal process. But some tenants may not know that.
Now we're facing probably one of the highest housing crises in the city in decades.
Diaz got no immediate relief in court Tuesday.
I'm hoping that they will come to the table and negotiate with us so that he can stay in his apartment.
But next week, the judge will consider a motion to dismiss the case.
All right, you saw the video. Let's get into the article. Boston. George H.W. Bush was president. The Berlin Wall fell, and Juan Diaz moved into an apartment on Oak Street in Hyde Park. It all happened in 1989. Diaz is still there, but won't be for much longer if his landlord persists in her efforts to evict him. Efforts that started off rather clumsily with a note last fall indicating Diaz had 30 days to get out. I don't sleep, I don't eat, Diaz said through an interpreter. You have to be in this position to know what it feels like, which is why I speak to everyone else who is going through this too, because I understand what they're going through. This guy has lived in this apartment since 1989, which is, 34 years, and he still has to talk to an interpreter. I mean, come on, man. 34 years in the US and you haven't learned English yet. But that's a different topic. Okay, so the landlord here taped a note saying that, okay, you got 30 days to get out. So this sounds like this landlord was doing things pretty informally, because that isn't exactly the eviction procedure anywhere that I invest, okay? Especially not in a place like Boston. Now, I don't know if the landlord knew that this was an official eviction or not, but when you take that notice telling this guy, hey, you've got to get up out of this unit, well, that is an eviction. This tells me this is not a person who is like a professional landlord or even a part-time landlord such as myself, but this is a person who has a rental property and is doing things very informally. And I think the fact that this guy has been in there for the last 34 years should be indication that, okay, probably the rents are very, very far below what the market rents are, and everything isn't up to snuff in terms of this business. Okay, probably is not this person's primary source of income. What Diaz is going through in legal terms is a no-fault eviction, which means that the tenant is paying the rent and has been a good tenant, but nevertheless is facing eviction, said Zafiro Patino, a community organizer for the Tenants' Right group, City Life Vida Urbana. Sometimes they want to raise the rent quite a lot. Other times they need the unit for a member of the family. The latter is the purported reason why Diaz was asked to vacate his apartment, which sits atop a trio of small businesses: a pizza joint, a tax preparation shop, and a wireless store. There was just one problem with the property owner's eviction notice: it isn't legal. And yeah, that's a huge problem right there, okay? It's pretty obvious. It was pretty obvious to me when a note taped on the door is not a legal eviction notice, okay? So if the property owner didn't know the proper way to remove this guy, then what she should have done is gone and found an attorney, okay? Especially in a place like Massachusetts, okay? I don't know what the reporting requirements are. If you're from Boston, put a comment down below and just let us know the hoops you have to jump through in order to evict the tenant. But it's obvious that the property owner did not know this, okay? And my guess is that the property owner is more focused on the commercial tenants. It says that a pizza shop, tax preparation place, and a wireless store were the three primary commercial tenants, and it had some residential units up above, and that's where this guy lived, right? So the commercial units were probably paying all the bills, and the property owner was just like, yeah, whatever, I get a little bit extra from this little tenant, but I'm not really worried about just a tenant who is living in the property. I'm more worried about keeping these commercial spaces full, because that is the real moneymaker. And unfortunately, commercial leases are they're nothing at all like a residential lease. And residential tenants have a lot more rights than commercial tenants. So that's probably part of the reason why all of this was done very informally. So let's continue. The landlord has to start the process in court, Patino said. We advised him not to leave because the landlord has no real authority to take him out of his home. The only person who can evict you from a home is a judge. Diaz took City Life's advice and stayed put, each month sending in his rent, $1,350 for his one-bedroom unit. The landlord accepted those checks, and that was a mistake. Yeah, that was a big mistake. Okay, every landlord who knows anything knows that the second you take that check, well, guess what? They get to stay. Okay, that's the reason why a lot of landlords will not accept the rent payment from people that are going through the eviction process, because they know better. Okay, it's obvious to me that this landlord here was just doing things, and they accepted the monthly rent check after you told this guy to leave. I mean, come on. Man. Like I said, you should go to an attorney. Yes, it's going to cost you a lot of money to evict a tenant. Yes, I know. I've spent that money. We all have. And you know what, there's landlords out there who can, they know the process well enough where they don't have to hire an attorney. But if you don't, my suggestion is go and get an attorney. You know, you need to know the specific laws for the jurisdiction where you are going through, you know, this whole eviction process, because if you don't, you could jump into huge mistakes just like this landlord did, okay? When you begin an eviction process, if you'd like to assure that you're able to evict the tenant, you have to reserve your rights, said Carly Margolis, an attorney with Greater Boston Legal Services, meaning that you have to state that if you, the tenant, pay me anything, it's not rent. It's just interim payments for you using the apartment. You actually have to clarify that in the eviction notice. However, this landlord failed to do that, and my client continued to pay rent diligently every month. Margolis said that those payments, in a legal sense, essentially reset the tenancy clock. He now has a new lease, she said, basically a de facto lease agreement, and they no longer can evict him. They'd have to start from scratch. Yeah, and so the tenant has an attorney. You know, this is how ridiculous this is. The tenant has an attorney. I'm not saying that the tenant paid for the attorney. Probably this is a free attorney. You know how these very left-leaning cities, they give free attorneys to these tenants fighting eviction. Well, that's probably what happened. The tenant got a free attorney. Landlord doesn't have an attorney. The landlord is getting just completely screwed, okay? The landlord now does not have the ability to get rid of this tenant and then put their family member is essentially homeless, got nowhere to go because they can't move into this unit. And this person who's lived there for 34 years, you know, like, and in a ideal situation, you'd be like, okay, I've lived here 34 years. I was paying below market rent, and I'm grateful that this landlord was allowed me to stay here for this long. But now the tenant has this entitled mindset of, oh, this is my place. You can't force me out. I'm going to stay here forever. Well, see, that's the problem when you're nice and friendly and you try to, keep the tenant in there. No, you need to treat the tenant with respect. Treat your business like it's a business, okay? They need to have a clearly defined lease in place. You need to go ahead with all the rent increases. Don't be nice. There's no reason to be nice because you get screwed over in the end if you are nice. And that's exactly why I say, when a landlord is too nice to the tenants, too friendly, they get taken advantage of. And now this tenant has this entitled mindset, and they're not going to leave. They're not going to leave. They're going to fight it. They're going to have, lawyers and tenants' rights groups and all these people saying that you as the landlord are a jerk and, a moron and evil. And meanwhile, the only thing you wanted was for, a family member to be able to move into the property that you own. Gee, I feel bad for this landlord, but this isn't a problem that is too late to correct. Go get a real estate attorney, please, and get the process rolling in the correct way. Okay, that's my advice. So I hope that this video will help other small mom and pop landlords who might have made the same sort of mistakes, okay?